because of COVID, massive layoffs, you have a housing issue, especially with renters, like we've never had before. Many people are bracing for massive evictions. And you have a lot of investors who are just waiting for it. Or they are waiting for these evictions so that they can bank, okay? California, this is really, really interesting. California is paying off residents past due rent that was accrued during the COVID-19 pandemic, giving renters a clean slate, according to Governor Newsom. This was recently announced. The move would fulfill a promise to landlords to help them break even while giving renters relief. And remember, the vast majority of those that own property, they are not wealthy. These are moms and dads and grandmamas and granddads. They own a property, but they're not rich. And so when they don't get paid, well, that's a real sacrifice for them. So this was a way to stabilize the market, not just to look out for renters. A little over 2% of people in California who have applied for rent relief during the pandemic have received it. Do you hear that number? A little more than 2%. Also, state officials who haven't yet decided whether they'll extend California's eviction moratorium, which is set up to expire in just a few days on June 30th. Wow. Adrienne, I think this is actually a good direction. And I hope other states start adopting some of this, if not expanding on it. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's the fact that this is a chain reaction. When we have it so that people can't pay their rent, they're put in a position where they potentially could be evicted. And when it comes to housing eviction, as Representative Ilhan Omar had pointed out, it disproportionately impacts Black people. And that is very problematic, in part because we know that COVID disproportionately impacted Black people, and just about every aspect and area of life when it comes to misfortune is going to fall on the Black community. And also it's important to note that generally when people are unhoused and they're experiencing homelessness, the likelihood of being arrested and being put into the criminal justice system increases exponentially. And as a result of that, we have this cyclical cycle going on where we have people suffering who are oppressed, generally Black and brown people, and they end up in the criminal justice system. And so this system is extremely problematic, particularly here in California. I'm really glad that Governor Newsom is making these strides, especially because the reality is the vast majority of people on the streets are Black here in Los Angeles, despite the fact that we only represent maybe about 8% of the LA community. We're 50% of the homeless community. And that is very, very problematic.
Everything has a cause and effect relationship. When you talk about housing, you talk about homelessness. Well, if you have an increase in homelessness because you have failed to remedy the housing crisis or the rent crisis in your community, then those individuals will become taxing in other ways, such as criminality or going to jail for simply trying to survive. You also have the taxing on the system as it relates to social services that will need to be utilized in order to try to help some of that community. So this is a good thing. And really, when you look at it from a holistic standpoint, it is preventative. It saves the money. It saves taxpayer dollars in the long term. Would you not agree?
Yes, it does save money at the end of the day because it keeps a lot of people from going under. As you had mentioned, the vast majority of these landlords aren't necessarily large corporations or individuals who own considerable property. Maybe it's just a mom and pop. I'm a landlord, but if my tenants were to go under and not pay, I'd have to pay my rent and a mortgage. That would be, it would just be very, very difficult. And so as a result of that, you see people rolling into potential bankruptcies and considerable losses. So it's good that Gavin Newsom is doing this to prevent that chain reaction, but we still do need more to help people, specifically those groups that have suffered the most due to COVID, to lift everybody up because, hey, when the lowest and weakest of us rises, we all rise.
That's right, and that's something that it baffles me why politicians don't get that. When you help the least of these, you help everybody, right? It's not that you help individuals who are absolutely in need of it and no one else benefits. Everybody benefits from that kind of system. But the truth is, these systems make money on the ignorance or the willful ignorance of politicians, right? And because these systems make money and you have lobbyists that have agendas, you typically don't get to sound policy. Anytime there's a common sense policy order or common sense policy idea on the table, and there's this adversity to that policy, and you're scratching your head and you're wondering, well, wait a minute, this makes sense. It makes sense short term. It makes sense long term. Why is it so difficult to implement this policy? Well, typically, that means there's some money somewhere behind it lobbying against the policy being passed, because there is money in the willful ignorance of politicians.
Yes, there is. There's money everywhere politicians happen to be. It definitely seems like this is something that motivates them. And in this instance here, acknowledging the fact that there is money that can be used to help the people and is supposed to be your job in supporting we the people. It's something that a lot of politicians don't want to do because, that's always the excuse. We don't have the money for it. We don't have the money for it. But the reality is we do have the money for it, and it should be allocated to people who need it the most.
Yeah, we got plenty of money for it. We always have money to kill people and blow things up. It's called war. I've never heard someone argue on the House floor, listen, it would be a good idea to go to war with Iran, but we just don't have it in the budget. We always have it in the budget to kill people and to blow things up. It's never an argument about that whatsoever. And so all of a sudden we start pinching pennies when it comes to domestic policies. Hell, we're talking about last administration getting rid of Meals on Wheels for senior citizens who are shut in. We don't have money for that, according to the previous administration. We spent $22 million chasing unidentified flying objects. We spent money on that, a lot of it.
Ridiculous. There's always money in the budget. That's what it is. Always money.
Yeah.